So I'll start with this presentation. I've been given technical presentations probably since 2003, and this one is a little bit different. It's not just a technical presentation. It's more we can see it from the management point of view of the oil condition monitoring. So I work for VERITAS. VERITAS operates 16 oil analysis labs worldwide. We are focused on lube oils, of course, coolants, diesel, fuels, grease, metal working fluids, and refrigerants. My background, I started in 2003 in this into the reliability world. I'm a reliability engineer focused on OCM. Of course, I'm an international speaker. I've been in many countries talking about oil and reliability. And I have a couple of master's degrees. And the last one is the big data one. And that allows me to understand more how the data can help not only our entire situation, but how can it help the OCM from a different perspective, right? So as I said before, I think right now, probably a lot of us work for a global company in somehow, right? So global company typical is the one that has in many countries, has operations in many countries, and we talk about a budget of millions of dollars with thousands of assets, and it includes a couple of hundred or maybe thousand people working. Personally, me myself, I work for Bureau Veritas, and we have 80,000 people worldwide. So one of the things that these global companies are trying to is to think global but act local, right? So the same situation from the OCM perspective, right? So we have global companies have many different locations, a lot of assets, and they are trying to know the health of their oils and the health of their components, the lubricated components. So for that aim, global companies are looking for local labs, for example, or they are trying to ship their samples to other countries. So that caused a lot of problems, and there for every problem there's an opportunity, right? So my intention with this short presentation is that to show you what are the problems, what are the main concerns that global companies have been suffering in the last years, and how to improve those, how to change those problems to opportunities, right? So I have been tracking around 20 different global companies since 2012, and I've still been doing that. So the next couple of slides that I will show you represent what these global companies have been doing to select or to work with an oil analysis laboratory in the world, right? So the first thing that people used to look when we talk about oil analysis, of course, is price, right? So a lot of companies, global companies, are putting their focus on how much they have to pay for each sample, right? So if we start going down, we have the finding a local lab and or shipping samples overseas is probably the next problem that the global companies are dealing with. And the third, the last one in this group is to find if the lab has an ISO accreditation, right? So we can see that there's a small difference between the price and the ISO accreditation when we talk about the global company's main concerns, right? So, but there's another group, and it's very at the bottom of this one. When a global company is looking for an oil analysis lab, how many global companies really ask or visit the lab and valued and take an assessment of the equipment that the laboratory has over there? How is the process that how do this lab analyzes the samples over there? So how's the process? How clean, how lean is the process, right? Everything is lean these days. What about the people? What kind of people does the lab has? All of them are technicians, certified technicians. How's the experience? And when we talk about experience, for example, we need to understand that each lab could have a couple of data analysts or diagnosticians, what they're called in Europe. And how about the experience of these guys? Because the diagnosticians, the data analysts are the ones that are going to tell us if our oil sample is right, is correct, or we have to change it, or we have to filter the oil, or whatever other recommendation that that we will follow from them. So this is very important too. But as you can see here, almost anyone are doing this type of assessment when they start working with a lab, right? And here at the very bottom, we have that probably none global companies have been running a pilot test. And a pilot test means let's take, I don't know, 100 samples, 200 samples, and compare those samples against a lab that we already have identified in another country that we can we know that they are doing a good job, right? So you can see the difference here that goes, the price is the most important thing, but the pilot test is really nothing, right? So we will focus on these three because we will talk about later on this tree. So again, I have been following a lot of global companies, and I started asking, what are the problems? What kind of problems this global companies has when they're doing oil analysis? So the first problem is following the standards, right? So each lab has a different standard. Probably they are doing an ASTM or an DNA. So those are different standards, but that they can be put it together. So they don't understand what's really happening with the standards when they talk about with a lab, right? And not only standards, but each lab can modify the standards that they are following. So we have a different procedure, and a different procedure can have a different result, right? So what about the reporting? And this is one of the problems that a lot of global companies are suffering in these days, because the reporting type is very confusing. We have different web portals. We have reports in PDF. We even have reports in Excel or Word. I have seen a couple of labs that the final product is a Word, a report, an oil analysis report on Word, right? So those are the main problems that the global companies are having these days. And what about the criteria? The criteria means having an experienced and knowledge diagnostician or data analyst that it's really given given the global company a good result, an accurate and good result, so they can do something with the oil or with the component, right? So this is a huge number, right? Almost a lot of companies are suffering because they're not working with very experienced or knowledge DAs, right? So let's take a look at this problem from the perspective that I defined before. So a lot of the global companies are putting their efforts in price, finding a lab, or looking for ISO accreditation, but they are not putting the efforts in what really are causing the problems right now, right? So I like this saying here in the States, they are putting the carts before the horse, right? So of course that these global companies will have all these problems just because they didn't focus on the cause of the problem initially at the when they start the project with a new lab, right? All right, so let's take a look at this problem from a different perspective. So following the same survey that I was doing, that I started doing in 2012, I found that a lot of global companies has what they call condition monitoring experts in two areas. The first area is vibration analyst, and when I say an expert, I'm reaching out to people that are level 3 or level 4 in vibration. And when I talk about oil analysis, the one with A, I'm talking about people certified with at least an CLS or the new MLE. So you can see how hard it is to understand that probably global companies has no really experience or expert in the oil analysis domain, right? So we are measuring here the amount of experts per 10 per 1,000 assets, right? So probably nothing, less than zero, less than one in the case of the States. 0.7 is the number. So this is critical. This is critical. All the problems that these companies are having, it's probably because they don't have an expert in their team, right? An expert in their team that they can focus the problems that we are talking about, because a lab is an entire different entity, and they speak a different language that the global companies, right? So I had a situation some months ago with a global company. Of course, they don't have a loop expert. They operate in 21 countries, around 36,000 assets. They have been working with 9 labs, and they have 14 different loop type oils, between oils and greases. So for those labs, the problems that they are having, of course, is that they have 5 different reporting platforms. The inconsistencies in criteria and recommendations are all over the place. There's no link to maintenance management system and the platforms that they have here, right? So let's go back to the problems that they are suffering. And of course, the problems are because they are having many different water procedure measurements for the same standard. Right, it's the same standard with different procedure. The particle counting, that for some of us is very important. They have 3 different type of procedures, and of course, this is a problem, because in some cases they have to filter the oil. In some cases they have to change the oil. In some cases they have to do nothing. Right? So again, the problems are the procedure, the problems are the platforms. The problem is that they don't have an expert on this team. So there's a lack of expertise in this situation. So to summarize the case study that I worked with some months ago, I ran an audit on a global company, and they were working with 3 different labs at that time. So I analyzed one of the samples. They have different analysis standards. They don't have a unified criteria to say this oil is in abnormal conditions, or at least in monitoring, or is critical. And for that reason, let's take a look at the results that we have from each lab. So lab 1 says you have high water and particles. Lab 2 says you have high particles, and lab 3 said your oil is in the normal conditions. So following the path of the flow of information that we have, this company has to replace the oil and the filter based on the recommendations on the first lab. So on the second lab, following the recommendations, they just have to filter the oil. And in the third situation, they don't have to do anything. Right. So in the third and in the first 2 situations, this implies that they have to, or even shut down or renting a filter car, but they will spend money on that. And we don't know what's going to happen here, because if the oil has water or particles, there will be some effect in the equipment lately. Right. So this is a typical situation that conduct the global companies to suffer a lot of problems and with the oil analysis. So I try to define and to identify the scenarios that global companies are having, not from the oil analysis perspective, but from the maintenance management perspective. So the first scenario is due to the standard modifications, results are not comparable between labs. So the second one is that because they don't have a unified criteria, it leads to different maintenance decisions, right? And the third and the worst scenario that I have seen is that oil analysis does not benefit at the maintenance at all. So they are not integrating the oil analysis results, recommendations, or anything related with oil analysis to the maintenance management. So we can see here how in these 3 scenarios, the maintenance management is going apart from the oil condition monitoring. right? And oil condition monitoring can give a lot. It's a really good tool, but it needs to be treated as a tool. So it needs to have some kind of organization, and you know, you have to push the OCM internally in your company. So some recommendations and some suggestions. So look for the test that will lead to determine the failure mode of both oil and component, right? So don't just go for what the lab recommend to you. Just you have to think. You have to ask your expert. What are the failure modes that the oil analysis can tell me with this analysis, right? So the second one is know and evaluate the difference between each lab: instrumentation, procedures, personnel, modifications, and along, etc. Right? So we have to know before. I mean, ISO 1705, it's incredible. I mean, every lab should have it. Every good lab should have it, but it's not the only one. Price is not the only one either. There's a lot of things behind that. Assess the degree of knowledge and specialization of the data analyst. Some of them are really good in, I don't know, engines. Some of them are really good in gearboxes, but not everyone is really good at everything. So you have to assess that one and evaluate reporting platform and methods based on your needs. Not only what the lab is providing you, but what do you need? What are you looking for exactly? What type of data do you need to have in your report? And see if that data is in the web platform, right? And the last one is the impact of lubricant, even grease or oil, is very high on your assets. So do you need a lubrication expert on your team? You're dealing with, I don't know, global companies have been dealing with a couple of millions, at least to 20 millions, when they talk about just oil and grease volume, but the impact of the grease and the oil is very high on your assets. So probably you need an expert. And as I said before, an expert is not a person who has been working with oil and greases for I don't know how long time, but an expert is someone who has been recognized in the industry, is someone who has a certain degree or very long knowledge, right? So as I said before, this was not a technical presentation, but I think it's very important for companies, for customers in the global level, and to focus on the problems that they are having and try to become that problem an opportunity, right? So this is probably a path to go to that opportunity. All right. So Josh, I think on time, 20 minutes clock.
You are massively on time. And Jorge, first of all, amazing topic, because you know, how many people actually go through that thought process of that bottom half of the criteria, right? So what are your thoughts on getting even, you know, granular into assessing, let's say, a network of labs where there's commonality even in the equipment, right? The instruments that the labs are using, right? Is it the same type? You know, they're using, you know, ICP versus AA, or, you know, for wear metals. So what's your take on, you know, commonality of the same brand model of equipment to do the analysis?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Josh. So I can compare that to my father-in-law's car and my car. We used to have the same car, right? Exactly the same model, the same brand and everything. But for some reason, my car broke before his car, right? So because I was driving it different, in a different way that he was doing it. So the same situation with oil, with oil labs, right? So some labs are very they work with a different type of oils than others. They apply different methodology, and they modify the procedures based on ASTM to fulfill the type of oils that they're having, right? So one of the a good a good practice before selecting a lab is preparing a pilot project with samples that you know the concentration of let's say the spectrochemical analysis, the elements, or a particle counting. So try to understand how they are doing it, how they are analyzing that test pilot that you already have the results before, right? So that will lead you to know if that lab is the one that you need, or if there's any slight modification that you have to request them. This type of pilot will help you to understand which one is that, and if they are really good at what they're doing, because everyone says that they're really good, right, at what they're doing. So you have to find that.
For sure.
That's true.
So that leads into your do you need an internal expert, right, to know what you need, right? Because not everybody knows what they need to know. And B, it's about that sort of procedures, right? So even if you have the same equipment, but you're running, let's say, heavier vis, high throughput oils in one lab, and in the other one, it's a slightly different procedure, and they're more geared towards, let's say, aviation sampling versus heavy industrial sampling. It could be the same equipment, but you're going to get varying results because they're like your father's car and your car. One,
that's correct.
Heavily running it. That's an interesting aspect.
That's correct.
And you mentioned the sort of the comments or diagnostics, the differences between the different laboratories, right? And I'm thinking of a global company trying to contract a single multi-lab company, because there's the thought process of a common database, common procedures, common equipment. How does a network lab or a network of labs have the same level of diagnostics, and how does a global company run a pilot test to demonstrate that?
Good question. So before joining Bureau VERITAS, I work in R&D, and we have one, I will say probably one of the best labs in the world in Spain. So it's really hard to have the same equipment in each lab, right? Because there's money involved, budget and everything. So you cannot have the same, exactly the same equipment. But what you can share between that group is knowledge, right? Probably you cannot have the same equipment, but knowledge can be spread into the group. So what I found joining a global company is that I had an expert on, I will say, engines here in the States, and I was lacking of expertise in engines in Spain. Right, so the same situation with many other different components. So the good thing to working with a global company is that you can have that support from the expertise level, right? No one can know anything at the same time, right? So you have to support your guys, that they are knowledge in some type of component or oils or a different situation, right? For example, we have a couple of guys that are really experts in FTIR. They have a PhD in FTIR. So every time that we need those guys, even if they are in Australia, we can ask them to support, because they are in our internal network, right? So that's very important. That's why I'm not saying that don't work with a global company or a local company. I'm not saying that. Local companies are great. Local companies are the base of a global company, of course. But we have to see it that way, right?
Excellent. And a question came in from John McGrath. So what about round robin intercalibration schemes to assess the capabilities of the labs?
Yeah, thank you, John. So I think round robins are a great example of finding the problems, our problems, or finding how far we are from the media, right? From the average. All the labs are following these procedures, and the average is there. So how far we are from there. So it's a good example of following what the market is doing, right? Uh, but unfortunately, a round robin is not. It will not be for every single type of problem that we can have in our lab, or every single type of samples different samples that we can have in our lab. So it's a good way to measure it, but I will include it as a part of the rest of the things that are under the iceberg, right? Not in the top, but under.